Thank you so much. Namaste, everyone. Here in Delhi, it is 10 past midnight. So I guess it's the day is just starting in Canada. But thank you so much for having me here. And we all came together united by a love and appreciation for yoga. I was born and grew up in former Yugoslavia. And the concept of yoga back then was not necessarily that well known. The only kind of connection that I ever seen anybody practicing yoga was one of my parents' old neighbors in the place in the mountains where we had the holiday home. And he was a martial art specialist. And every morning he would be, whether it was winter time or a summertime, he would get out, get himself in a lotus position, and he would meditate. And I remember being very young and at that time being really fascinated, because fascinated that somebody could sit in that position and at the same time to be so peaceful and so kind of away from everything. Now, fast forward many years later, of course, I always was fascinated with India, everything to do with India, but I had a very idealistic idea of India. I thought that everybody here was in the state of nirvana, that everybody was practicing yoga, that cobras, chamas were everywhere, and then people were living that lifestyle. And 18 years ago, when I finally came here, my husband is an Indian, so I am adopted by India and very grateful and blessed for it. When I came here, I kind of jumped to the idea. I said, now I'm going to learn yoga, because it was like one of the things that were always somewhere in the back of my mind. However, I never kind of had a chance to experience it, because on one side, I was a national level basketball player. And as the war started in Bosnia and Herzegovina, survived the war, and halfway through, toward the end of the war, got a chance to play professionally in Germany. So off I went to Germany to start my life as a professional basketball player. And lo and behold, 1 week prior to signing my first professional contract, I injured my knee. And not only I injured my knee, but I kind of ripped everything there was in the knee. So the first surgery was unsuccessful. 6 months down the line, I gained some 25 kilos. There were lots of imbalances in my body. And I had to have another surgery. So after the second surgery, I was told I will never be able to walk again without a limb. That not only my professional career was over, but pretty much that I would never be able to use my body the way I was used to. And that if I ever get injured, I will pretty much have to have a crutches when I'm walking. And that really devastated me, because basketball was my anchor. It was something that kept me focused. It kept me sane. Because of basketball, I survived the war mentally, not physically, but mentally. It was that the world could be collapsing, everything can be coming to an end. But for as long as I had the basketball, I was good to go. And then, and I was very, very young at that time. And that left me in a void. So that void created pretty much some good few months of a self-destructive path. I was emotionally very distraught. I was going from anger to sadness to frustration and everything in between. The war was still going on in my home country, so there was the worry about my family. Are they going to survive? What are they doing over there? being completely alone in that space, not having anyone to complain to or share my pain with. And I also started drinking, started smoking. So I kind of tried to do, and that is what happens with a lots of people who have a deep hurt. Whatever the reason for that hurt is coming from, that we try to numb ourselves using different things. Or we try, in my personal case, I try to be so diametrically opposite from everything I believed in, because the person that and the life that I was supposed to have was not coming to realization. So I try to kind of detach myself by doing everything which was against everything I stood for. And around 4 or 5 months of that, I was feeling worse to what I started with. I woken up one morning, I look at myself in the mirror, and I couldn't recognize the person that I saw in the reflection. And not only I couldn't recognize the person that I was becoming, but at that moment I had a vision of my life 20 years down the road unless I change something. And I didn't like what I saw. So that was the first time I sat down and I meditated. At that point of time, I didn't know that was meditation because I had no reference point to it. I sat down, I quiet my mind, and the tiny, tiny, tiny little voice in my head told me that my body could heal. I could get better. I just needed to find the way how. Once I came out of that space, and while I was in the meditative state, it felt really real. I had no doubt that what I heard was true. I had no doubt that it was coming from the source or somewhere much wiser and much deeper and much higher to what I was. And there was a feeling of a deep serenity. There was a feeling of peace, of quiet, of content, of all the feelings that I haven't had experienced before that point of time. So I came out of that space, and the first thing was that, okay, now I started hearing voices. There is a diagnosis for that. And then I again sat myself, but I said, I cannot deny how truthful it felt. And I made a choice, and I made a deal with myself that I am going to listen to that inner guidance. I am going to listen to that voice, because the reality that I was living at that point of time, it was not making me feel better. It was not making me live better life. And I was becoming very disconnected with the person who I was. So I kind of sat with myself and I said, okay, Vesna, you have a choice. One choice is that you continue this self-destructive life, and you're always going to carry that grudge. You're always going to carry that hurt. You're always going to carry that feeling of that your life was turned upside down. Or you can kind of take a leap of faith and listen that guidance and see where it takes you. And that's what I've done. And that has been a turning point for many things. So I started studying, I started exploring movements, I started kind of making notes, what was working for me, what was not working for me. So fast forward to some years ahead, I was introduced to Pilates, and Pilates has been heavily influenced by yoga. It is not yoga, They're very different in many crucial parts. However, in the essence, there are lots of similarities. And for me, at that point of time, Pilates was a missing link. And I jumped fully into it, immersed myself completely. And just as I started thinking, this is something I could do for life. In the meantime, I returned back to Bosnia. I was working as a translator for a peacekeeping mission for a US Army and a part of security detail team. So that was my serious job. But on the same time, I kept on studying, I kept on exploring movement, got certified, got my degree in nursing as well, apart from political science on the other side. And then all my free time, I was conditioning soldiers. So that was my hobby, because that kept me together with the movement, but at the same time, it was helping me to keep getting better. And Pilates for me was a missing link. It was the first time that someone presented of treating a body as a unit and not as a set of parts. And just as I started thinking, this is something that I could do as a full-time thing, by another chance, I met my husband, Anurag. We met online through a pure providence, and before Facebook time. And after 6 months of chatting online, we decided to meet in person, because I knew I got a friend for life. So he came to Bosnia. We spent 3 weeks in Bosnia, and then he invited me to come to India. And the first time, and this was in 2003, first time I came to India, and he took me in Delhi sightseeing to India Gate. And as I stepped out, that little voice, which has been guiding me for so many years, that little voice told me that this is where I was meant to be. And this is something for me to do here. And I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what and how. However, I made a deal with myself that I'm going to follow that voice, because it is coming from the source, which is true, which is loving, which is much higher and wiser than I am in my physical form. So during that trip, Anurag proposed to me. We were already in love anyways. And I was like, yeah, of course. So I never said yes so easily to anything before in my life. So went to Bosnia, packed my bags, broke everybody news, came, and been in India for 18 years. And that is when my journey onto the parallel, the physical, yogic, as well as spiritual path kind of started coming together. On one side, the moment I came into the country, I wanted to learn yoga, because I wanted to understand how much of Pilates is influenced by yoga. So, to my disappointment, India at that time was not a country where everybody was walking around in the state of nirvana. At that point of time, yoga was not so trendy. It was something that was kind of done by elderly men and women, and mainly doing a pranayama and the basic stretches. That entire yogic way of life was a kind of, you could find it in ashrams in Rishikesh or Mysore. And that is when a lot of foreigners would go to study and learn yoga. Delhi itself had a few known yoga teachers, and the rest would be either not proficient in English or would be just focusing on the breath. So I kind of tried to take a few sessions here and there. However, only when my daughter was born, which is now she's 14 years old, right? As she was born, that is when I got a spiritual calling. And I realized that the physical aspect is only one aspect of cells, that we are influenced by our thoughts, by our emotions, by our circumstances, the way we understand them. And then the body manifests all of that. And the way you bring whatever energy you bring into yourself, whichever energy you paint your inner being with, the rest of the body or the body is going to manifest, and it's going to come and transfer in this or manifest in the body or manifest as your reality. So when Daniela was born, I got a spiritual calling. And as I got my spiritual calling, at the same time, my energy master appeared to me. So I started studying and exploring the forms of Reiki and intuitive healing. At the same time, some of the clients that throughout I've been teaching, because in the meantime, I also got certified to be a physiotherapist. So I've been working with the physical body and with the clients throughout, basing my teaching mainly in Pilates. Functional applied science came later, in the movement, healing through the movement. So as my calling happened, kind of 5 things happened at the same time. First, my energy master appeared in front of me, and I started dwelling into the healing and energy work. At the same time, some clients who I was becoming friends with have organized a retreat in Goa, and I was invited. And I thought that they invited me to teach. So I decided to leave my then 7-month-old baby, because I thought I was going on the assignment. And to my surprise, when I got there, I'd been invited as a guest. And it was a 7 days retreat with the sattvic food. That was the first time in my life I actually had a sattvic food, because in my tradition and culture, eating meat is a given. A vegetarianism was almost like an unknown concept. Or if you turn vegetarian, you would be asked why, what happened, are you okay, is everything fine? So the upbringing, now lots of things have changed, right? I mean, we are talking about this like a 15 years in between. But as I've been invited for that period of time, we had a yoga teacher on board. So from morning till the evening, we were, for that 1 week, we actually done everything the way yogis are doing. So from the morning practice to pranayam, to sattvic food, to evening practice. And my body took it up. It was such a revelation. It was almost like, okay, this has been missing in my life. So I kind of jumped full onto the lifestyle. And soon after, then again, I was a guest with another family who are Jains. So I kind of continue with vegetarianism for a good few years thereafter. And then here and there, whenever I go home, I fell off the wagon, because it's easier not to argue with the family in certain. So I try to the level possible to still follow the same. Now, as I started studying and dwelling more into yoga, my fascination with yoga was not with asana, and that was never my intention, because I always looked at the body, that the physicality of the body I can take care of. I have always been fascinated by the esoteric part of yoga, about the way we see things, the way we understand things, how our ego gets in the way, and how can we, living in the modern and very competitive world, how can we be in the state of content and yet be accomplished as a professionals and be accomplished and competitive. So how can we actually merge the two worlds? On one side, by the way, can everybody turn off and mute the microphones, please? Because I'm hearing disturbances in the background. Excuse me. Yeah, thank you. So, to me, it was always fascinating from the perspective of I have always been of the opinion that it's very easy to be yogic or to live yogic lifestyle if you lock yourself in the ashram and then you have no temptations, you have no competitiveness, you're in the environment that is conducive to it. However, very early on, I realized that that's not the point. The point is, how can we live a productive, competitive life in this world with all our hopes, aspirations, dreams, needs satisfied on one side? And on the other side, how can we also be spiritual, be empathetic, be forgiving, and connected to divine? And that is where I feel is the key of sustainable living. It is that our mindfulness should not only extend on the retreats that we go to, or only when we are surrounding with like-minded people. Our mindfulness should be extending in every sphere of our lives. It should not prevent us of being successful in whatever that is we are doing. It should not prevent us from being competitive and living a productive life, but at the same time, to have the deeper understanding and knowledge that we are not just physical being, we are not just material being, but at the same time, we are spiritual and we are empathetic and we are all connected to divine source and we are all connected to one another. And that, to me, is the most amazing part. Of course, now, interestingly enough, in the meantime, yoga had started making waves, big waves, tsunami kind of waves around the world, where, and again, this is the advantage of the competitive world, because yoga got much better structured, it got more commercialized, which includes the lifestyle, sustainability, it includes the organic food. So there are advantages to that. And then the yoga got kind of reintroduced to India into this kind of repackaged format. Now, thanks to the Prime Minister Modi, we are also now having the International Day of Yoga, which is coming up. And thanks to that same thing, that we are getting connected around the world, in this particular case through Yoga Health Expo, which is doing the eighth annual expo, where we are bringing people, like-minded people, sharing experiences, kind of creating this platform, which is not only the connection between individuals, but it's also creating a particular energy field, because we are all connected. And that is where meditation and achieving a state of nirvana, that experience of being one with everything, and at the same time being unique, being large and being tiny. It is really, really humbling. And more of us that are connected with higher purpose and united in the common goal of sustainability, of kindness, of forgiveness, of acceptance, of being mindful towards nature on one side, animals on the other side, and fellow humans. Because until we do not create a critical mass of like-minded people, what kind of world we are going to live in 20 years from now? If I would have a premonition now and see the world that I would like to see is a world when we are more gentle with each other, when we are more calm with one another, more understanding with one another, more accepting of one another, and then that we are living not against the nature but with nature, knowing that this is the only home we can live in, being mindful of the oceans, of the water resources, being mindful of large corporation, and having the checks and balances in place. That do we really need that many things? Do we really need to? We have never lived, particularly Western world, we have never had more and yet been less happy and content. And there is a lesson in it, because you don't need much for happiness. And yet, if you forget that you're spiritual, if you forget that you are one with everything and you're connected to everything, then the ego, materialism, the competitiveness kind of takes over, to the extent that you're only living in the primal space. In the energy field, and that is where our chakras are the beautiful representation of that, is that our primal chakras, or what we call a lower energy chakras, they're primal. They deal with the primal energy, with procreation, with food, or with deeper sense of self. And the higher energy are towards others and divine. So if we forget that we are spiritual as well, that we are empathetic as well, that we are one with everything, and we cannot live in isolation to everyone and everything around you, then we get stuck in those primal energies. And those primal energies can lead to wanting more, generating more, selfishness, ego battle, wars, territorialism. Because the moment you expand, so the lower energies are kind of just focusing on you and how are you comfortable. However, unless you expand outside yourself, and that is where the space of the higher energies, that is when you actually realize the truth. And the truth is that we cannot be in isolation from one another. And until and unless all of us are thriving, none of us can be completely satisfied. And therefore, it is important, platforms like this are important. The way you communicate with others is important. The way you create a chain is important, because the energy carries. The energy that you sent out in the universe is the energy that comes back to you. And also, it creates the critical mass which is needed and required to turn this world into a more peaceful, more understanding, more compassionate world, to the one that we are living in. So that has been sort of my takeaway from these many years of studying and exploring and teaching, that our ego aside, you cannot live in isolation from everyone else. And if we are a little more open, a little bit more mindful, a little bit more understanding, a little bit more quiet in terms of deep breath, and take things with open heart and put the ego aside more often than not, we can create much better space. And when it comes to our inner world, that is our temple. Because unless you strengthen your internal house and your internal temple, then any storm, any situation that is happening around you can trigger you off. So your first and foremost strengthening has to happen from within, and meditation, breathing, sitting quietly, creating that space not only for your physical body, but more importantly for your spiritual and your emotional body, is something that can carry you far, far away. So I hope that by sharing this story and a little bit about my journey and how I see yoga, purpose of yoga, and how it interconnects us, is a little food for thought. And really thank you all for having me, for giving me this platform. And I hope to, and then if anybody has any questions, you can find me on Altacelo, Vesna's Altacelo, which means in Esperanto higher purpose, because I truly believe that all of us are here with a purpose. You just need to find one. And the best way to find your purpose is sit quietly, put all of those voices aside, till that little tiny, sometimes hardly audible voice kind of emerges and start guiding you. And once you have that guide, then there is no turning back, and that is never going to let you down. And it's always going to kind of take you and put you in touch and put you in positions when there is something to learn, to grow, and to thrive. So namaste, everyone, and thank you so much for having me.